Evening, it's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight, the Labour Party has shamed itself once again as it plans to vote in the Commons against the Conservative Party's proposal to have a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. This comes amidst a GBNews exclusive revealing the scale of the cover-up. Tonight, I'll be speaking to former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, asking her whether this is evidence that multiculturalism has failed. Meanwhile, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has been urged to borrow the Reform Party's policy of net zero immigration. Is this what we need? Plus, Facebook has let go of the age of censorship, dropping its biased COVID-era fact-checkers in favour of freedom of speech. I'll be joined by the director of the Free Speech Union, Toby, soon to be Lord Young, in just a moment. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the historian and broadcaster, Tessa Dunlop. As ever, let me know your views. It's a crucial part of the programme, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you. The top stories this hour. Jess Phillips says she has more important things to be thinking about than Elon Musk after he accused her of being a rape genocide apologist. The safeguarding minister has hit back at the billionaire's criticism of her for the first time.
Being in the spotlight like this and the intimation of what Elon Musk is, the disinformation, as I believe the Prime Minister referred to it as, has put out about me, it's endangering.
It's endangering you. I just want to be absolutely clear. Are you saying that as a result of some of Musk's tweets, that the threat to you has gone up and things are in place to protect your safety?
Yes.
Well, Musk made the comments after Ms Phillips denied a request for the Home Office to lead a public inquiry into the horrific abuse in Oldham, saying it should be done at a local level. The town in Greater Manchester was one of a number of areas where girls as young as 11 were groomed and raped over a decade ago in a national scandal that was exposed in 2013. Professor Alexis Jay, who chaired the independent inquiry, said today that people should just get on with implementing the recommendations made in previous inquiries. The comments come as the Prime Minister dismissed calls for a national inquiry yesterday, accusing the Conservatives of jumping on a bandwagon. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick today called once again for that national inquiry. A Home Office spokesman issued the following statement. We are working at pace across government to drive forward real action to implement the recommendations of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. In other news, Meta has announced it's scrapping its third-party fact-checking service in the US after 9 years and replacing it with a community note system similar to the one used by X, where commenting on the accuracy of posts is left to users. In a video posted alongside a blog post, Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg said third-party moderators were too politically biased and it was time to get back to our roots around free expression. The move comes as Zuckerberg and other tech executives seek to improve relations with US President-elect Donald Trump before he takes office later this month. Donald Trump has criticised Meta for its fact-checking policy, calling it censorship of right-wing voices. And today is the 10th anniversary of the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris, where 12 people were killed and 11 injured in its newsroom. The French satirical magazine has marked the anniversary with a special edition with the word indestructible appearing on the cover. Two brothers had stormed the offices of the magazine on the 7th of January in 2015 in retaliation to the magazine printing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. The shootings marked the start of 3 days of terrorist attacks in Paris. President Macron attended an event today to mark the occasion. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Now it's back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Earlier today, GB News' own Charlie Peters revealed an horrific story that detailed what happened to Sam, the grooming gang survivor from Oldham, who was gang raped and ignored by the police. After she went to a rape crisis centre, she was given the morning after pill. This is what happened.
I put the pill in my room and then I went out. The following day when I came home from being with friends, there was an officer sat in my mum's living room and my parents were in the kitchen, and he was quite vocally aggressive, telling me how important it was to take it. He had already gone through my room and found it and produced it in the living room to me. He popped it out the box and tried and passed it to me to take. I refused and said, I'm not ready, and walked off to go upstairs. He followed me into the hallway and he grabbed my arm and then grabbed my face and pushed it into my mouth to swallow and said, it's for your own good.
This is so appalling to hear Sam from Oldham's story. It's perhaps the most brutal of them all and is emblematic of why Oldham Council asked for a national inquiry. Indeed, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has tabled an amendment to tomorrow's Children's Wellbeing Bill to force a national inquiry into this consensus-shattering phenomenon. And yet the amendment will almost certainly be defeated. So twice in just over a week, Labour looks set to turn down an opportunity to do what is right for the victims and the country. As I said yesterday, Labour is hiding behind the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse from 2022, but this is untenable. We know that roughly 50 towns are affected by grooming gangs. IICSA covered only 6. Labour says that local inquiries are the answer, but the local ones do not have legal powers to summon witnesses, to take evidence under oath or requisition evidence. Local reviews can also be compromised by the councils themselves. Charlie Peters reported in the summer that whistleblower Maggie Oliver claimed the 2 leaders of the review resigned because they were prevented from accessing information they needed. At every turn, we've witnessed obfuscation, frustration and manipulation. Now is the chance for Labour to bring an end to the cover-ups and restore the trust that this scandal destroyed. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. Well, I'm joined now by the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Suella, thank you very much for joining me. This scandal is so appalling, the information that's come out, almost unreadable out in a public arena. It's so deeply shocking. What seems to have been the problem, though, is that nobody was willing to enforce the law because they were worried that they would be accused of being racists.
Yes, Jacob, you're absolutely right. If there's one way of distilling this scandal, one of the biggest scandals our country has seen in recent years, down to a root cause, it is that there was countless instances when the authorities, people with powers, people who owed duties of care to these vulnerable children, police officers, social workers, teachers, counsellors, and many, many more who knew about what was happening, were told by the victims themselves about these heinous crimes, and they turned a blind eye because they were scared of being accused of being called racist. They were scared of causing tension to community relations. They were scared of rocking the boat. And this seems to be a prevalent feature in this scandal. It's an injustice and disgusting.
Now, we were in office for a long time whilst this was going on. Now it's Labour's responsibility. But it's not really party political, is it? It is a cultural thing that the British establishment, for want of a better term, absorbed political correctness, thought that multiculturalism was axiomatically a good thing, and therefore didn't want to point out that white girls were being raped, molested, tortured by primarily people from a Pakistani community.
Yes, exactly that. And what we've seen is a squeamishness and an institutional fear, an institutional cowardice, as I would call it, to tell the truth. And officials and professionals covered up, abuse. They covered up most horrendous exploitation because they didn't want to put their heads above the parapet, and they didn't want to expose themselves to the claims of racism. And it's a symptom of the failure of multiculturalism. It's a symptom of wholesale professional failure. And it's a gross example of where political correctness has actually caused horrendous pain and suffering to thousands of young girls.
And is part of this problem the legal arrangements around protected characteristics, that officials, bureaucrats are under particular pressure not to treat everybody equally, but to treat them according to their protected characteristics. And this undermines the basic principle of equality before the law.
Yes, I think there's some truth in that, Jacob. I think the notion of protected characteristics finds itself in the Equality Act and has its genesis in international law and European law, European rights law as well. And what that really does is it divides people. It divides people by physical characteristics, and it does it, and it obliges public sector equality duty, something that you've railed against vociferously on your show, obliges the local authorities to make sure that minority groups are given special treatment effectively. And that is one contributory factor to this scandal. There's been a real fear to challenge injustice because the perpetrators were members of a minority ethnic group. And that was seen as far too radical, far too draconian an approach for professionals to take.
And isn't this a threat to the whole idea of multiculturalism? Don't we actually have to have some confidence in our own culture, that the British culture, the British way of life, indeed Western culture more broadly, that has been an amazingly civilizing and successful culture, is a good culture, actually a superior culture, that one that allows the rape of young girls?
Exactly. The British values, Judeo-Christian culture that we must subscribe to in Britain, that made Britain great, that was the foundation of Western civilization, which propagates respect, the rule of law, respect and equal rights for women, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of religion. You know, these liberties, these fundamental liberties, and civility have been, are define what I see as Western values, British values. But unfortunately, there are many people who come into this country and they don't subscribe to those British values. In fact, they take, for instance, their views of women. They treat women as chattel. They see women and Western women as objects that they can abuse and exploit. This is totally at odds with British values of tolerance and respect and civility. And that's why multiculturalism has failed. This grooming gang scandal is a symptom. It's not a cause, but we have to look at who we are as a nation. This whole episode is really raising up a mirror to our country, and we have a big question to ask ourselves. Are we going to stand confidently behind those values that you just talked about, that made our country great, that have made Western civilization great around the world? Or are we going to cower and bend the knee to outdated, outmoded, and frankly harmful values that are undermining our country?
Well, I think you make such an important point, and we settled this actually quite a long time ago, that if one looks at what John Locke was saying about religious toleration, just at the point at which the country is accepting people have a right to follow different religions, he says that you should tolerate other people's religion, but not if they want to break the ordinary law. And he uses the example of human sacrifice, that if there is a religion that wants human sacrifice, they can worship whatever gods they like, but they can't have human sacrifice because that is against the law. And this should surely apply to culture as well as religion. People are entitled to talk about and follow and have tolerated whatever culture they want, but they must never be allowed to break the basic law of the land.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, again, another way of putting that is that, you know, in England, there's a real notion of civility. Dare I say gentleness. I think that there is a characteristic of respect and equality that is renowned in British culture and the temperament of this country and these people. And I think that over time, that temperament of civility, welcome, friendliness, camaraderie has spilt over and got so weak into not standing up robustly for what we believe in and what we stand for and what defines our great culture and our great country, such that it's now been subsumed and taken over in some parts of our country by a culture that is not at odds with British values. And one example is the treatment of women. Another example is not learning the English language and expecting the state and others within the majority community to communicate in another language. That's not Britain. If you come to this country, you speak our language. If you come to this country, you sign up to our values.
And the two come together, don't they? Because a lot of women in minority communities are sometimes not allowed to learn the language because if they don't know the language, it is easier to hold them in subjection and easier to give them the impression that things like Sharia courts are the law of the land rather than simply tribunals that they don't have to follow, and that we need to have confidence in our own institutions and recognise that our civilization is great and is good, and that people who come here should live within it.
Absolutely. We have, listen, my parents came to this country from Kenya and Mauritius. They came here with a gratitude and an adoration of Britain, what Britain has done in the past, what Britain stands for in the present, and what she means in the future, and a wholesale, enthusiasm for the British culture, British way of life, British traditions, and British heritage. We can have successful stories of people coming to our country and being part of our country and playing a full part in our society. But if you're coming to this country and you're saying women are second-class citizens and men can own these women and men can mistreat these women and we can carry out female genital mutilation and we can use the law of Sharia or we don't need to learn the English language, that's not conducive. That's not conducive to a civilized society. And that's why I think it's incumbent on all of us who really love our country to stand up for our values, stand up for them loudly and proudly.
Suella, thank you very much indeed. The Assistant Chief Constable, Greater Manchester Police, Steph Parker, said, "We wholeheartedly apologise to all victims of child sexual exploitation whom we badly let down, including Sam, for the hurt and ongoing trauma caused by what happened. We have accepted that our actions fell far short of the help that they had every right to expect from us. We continue to work with Sam, and the abuse she suffered is one of a number of ongoing victim-focused investigations by our specialist unit investigating non-recent CSE, which has 100 dedicated detectives working at a pace survivors are comfortable with when the time is right for them. This has seen more than 100 arrests, with suspects continuing to be taken to court to face justice." Well, I think that's a reassuring statement. We get a lot of these statements, but that one's actually proper. Thank you, Suella. Next, we'll be debating Labour's decision to vote against an inquiry and discussing what Suella Braverman had to say about the scandal that has shocked the world.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's a boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down that boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big. Yeah. And lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre. Much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over. But the idea of the shop centred high street finished. That's gone. Never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad. It's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about grooming gangs with Suella, and the male Moggs have come in. Kevin says, "Dear Sir Jacob, Labour cannot possibly endorse a public inquiry because most, if not all, of the gangs operated in Labour-controlled councils." And John says, "Good evening, Jacob. For Labour to whip against a vote for an inquiry, it suggests to me they must have an awful lot to hide." Well, we're going to continue on the subject of grooming gangs and Labour's refusal to launch a national inquiry and the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman's comments on this programme just a few moments ago. I'm very pleased to be joined now by the erstwhile Labour advisor Paul Richards, as well as my panel, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop. Paul, thank you very much for coming in. You heard what Suella had to say. I put it to her that this is not actually a party political problem. It is a cultural problem, that we have allowed political correctness and the idea of multiculturalism to stop people enforcing the law equally. And that seems to me to be a deeper problem than who is doing what as the government of the day.
I do agree that it's not a party political issue, which is a shame that some people are trying to make it so with this stunt of a vote going on this week. But Suella Braverman, don't forget, was the Home Secretary. She wrote the government's response to the national inquiry into child sexual exploitation. In that response, she wrote that it was a good report, it was robust, it had breadth and depth to it. Subsequent ministers said that there shouldn't be another national inquiry, but the local route was the best one to go down. A letter from the minister to Oldham, long before Labour was elected, saying this is the right approach. So I will just wonder out loud why they're all now jumping on this as the only answer, when we've already had an inquiry and we've had successful local inquiries in Telford and other places which have been successful.
Because a lot of further information has come out as the court transcripts have emerged, that there's been information that some of the inquiries have actually been obstructed by councils, and that there are powers that national inquiries have that local inquiries
But we have
don't
had a
have.
national inquiry, and as Suella Braverman pointed out, it cost millions, it took years,
but we had
took all of those transcripts into account, and the victims' voices were heard as well.
Not all those transcripts were completed by the time, all those court transcripts.
But the victims were heard, and the person who chaired it has said we shouldn't have another national inquiry.
And
that's why Labour's taken this position. I think it is a nuanced position. I don't think it's just easy, but I think Jess Phillips has taken the right view, which should be locally led.
That the issue there is that further information has come to light. That
But then the local inquiry can look at that.
Specifically dealing with this. It was a very, very broad inquiry.
Well, that leads me to my second point, which is this is all about ethnicity. It's partly about ethnicity. It's also about power and where power lies. So those girls were being disbelieved by white men because they were young girls and they were working class. And that's often a component to this. Class and gender and where power is in society is also a component of
very
this,
important
which is
part
why
of
some of the grooming gangs are not of Pakistani origin.
No,
some of them are other origins.
But the proportionality
Vast
is
majority
strongly in favour, unfortunately, of these Pakistani
Well,
heritage.
except in other areas, for example, the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church or the BBC.
Right, on that argument, by the way,
like
if there were a load of Catholic priests, if there were 15 Catholic priests abusing a load of young white girls, it would be an even bigger story than the one that happened. So, yeah, let's accept that there are paedophiles within the Catholic Church, but let's try and pretend that there is any equation between what happened in Oldham and Rochdale.
No. What I'm saying is it's about where power lies. Who has power, who has voice, who has advocacy. And what we came through loud and clear in all of these horrific testimonies was that these girls were simply disbelieved. They were treated like dirt by the authorities, by the police, by the councils, by the people who were being paid to look after them.
But the thing is, everyone they turned to seemed to cover it up. Now, you have cover-ups in institutions, so the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, schools, all of whom have covered things up that they shouldn't have covered up. But the police weren't covering up in those circumstances. If it got to the police or it got to social services, that's what's so worrying about this is this tragic story about Sam, because she goes to the police and they turn her away. And you feel that if that isn't safe, there is no refuge. And
Sam's story is, I'm afraid, it's a pattern of being disbelieved by the people that you should be able to rely on.
That's why I think we need to be looking at
this. But there's no racial component to that. That was a white girl going to presumably white police officers.
No. But the abusers were the... But it's the issue of this needs specifically looking at, and it doesn't need a royal commission. You can have inquiries, and parliamentary inquiries can use the powers of Parliament to summon people and papers and can be quite speedy.
Well, we don't know there won't be a select committee inquiry into
this.
There may well be, but that wouldn't be up to the government. That would be up to the select committee to decide, wouldn't it?
With the banking inquiry, a specific committee was set up to do it,
that
which is
could
probably
be a
better.
way
But
forward.
let me bring the panel in. Tessa, you were listening to what Suella had to say, and this issue with multiculturalism that made people fearful of saying what was going on because they thought they would be accused of being racist.
First of all, to pick up on Paul's point, most eloquently put, I think the primary problem is the patriarchy. There are subsections below the patriarchy that exist as problematic, including the power that coalesces in certain ethnic minority communities. One way of addressing criminality within closed communities, and they don't only exclusively exist, as we know, flourishing too in the Church of England, in ethnic minority communities. But one way of addressing that is by properly focusing on getting parity of recruitment in the police force. At the moment, there are 3 times more Asian people in Britain than there are Asian policemen and women. And it was Roy Jenkins who said, if you want to police a community effectively, police them with their own. And we have single-handedly failed to do that since the 1960s.
It's a fine point, but it's completely irrelevant to these cases.
I'm so sorry, it's not irrelevant.
This wouldn't have made any difference to the grooming gangs.
It would, because the whole point is this idea that Suella and you both agreed on, and actually more broadly has been agreed, that's been tiptoeing around certain communities because of a sort of political correctness. But actually, if you police that community with their own, if there's proportional policing, you don't have that fear.
OK, but let me bring Kelvin in, because to some extent, there are some communities that apply Sharia law, have their own Sharia courts. They are policing their own effectively.
Well, I mean,
having their own courts,
Well, actually, you look at the councils and the way that some of the councillors in those particular towns reacted when told about these issues and what could be done about it. Many of them crossed the road to stop these investigations. So there was a lot to blame there. Look, at the end of it, this is about the only word that I never hear mentioned in all these discussions is being Muslim. So isn't it actually the situation that, in fact, these are Muslim attackers in a Muslim town, often with Muslim councillors? Well, that's true of Oldham.
Muslim town, Kelvin.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is the domination of like 40s and 50% of it, and stuff like that. And these are issues, and this is the point that Jenrick was making, that there are that some religions seem to have a medieval approach.
You're making it sound like paedophilia is an imported problem, and it's not an imported problem.
As a grooming situation, yeah, I totally accept that if you looked at the colour of what the sexual abusers are like in this country, they would be dominantly white. We're talking about groups of men getting together and then attacking young, in this case, young white girls.
But
could have been young.
because they're Muslims. That's not the reason.
No,
it's about
but
the power they
that's
occupy.
because of the
It's
point
about
that
cultural
Jenrick made,
attitudes, but it's
that
not
they are
about religion.
medieval in relation to the way they view women. And I'm very surprised that you are here not joining in the attack on these medieval people.
Do you know,
forgive
me if I don't...
Go on.
But the first sexual
accept that,
experience I had was age 12, and it was unwanted.
I'm not
a sexual attack from a white man who was, believe it or not, a farmer in a closed Scottish community.
One
So
man.
you know
I'm
what?
not talking
You know,
about
but
20
do you know
men
what?
attacking 20
But Kevin, the point is,
No, that is not the
male
point.
power in closed communities
Yes.
does
What are you
not, is
gonna
not
do about
colourblind.
male power?
Irrespective of your colour, you have the capacity, if you operate with impunity, to
I think
attack.
we're going to have to move on. Thank you very much to Paul, and sort of thank you to my panel. In a moment, I will be endorsing net zero, but not net zero carbon, net zero migration.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A very good evening to you. Now the sun has set, the temperatures are tumbling. Hard frost tonight. That'll be around for much of tomorrow morning. An ice risk in some areas and some places seeing further snow. We need to watch this weather front just pushing up from the south. The weather system that's brought all the snow recently has cleared away, but we've still got the winds coming down from the north. Plenty of snow showers still to come across Northern Ireland and northern and the west coast of Scotland. The snow showers we've seen through the day across northwest England, North Wales should fade away. For many, it's a dry night, clear night. And there's that hard frost, minus double digits in some parts of the countryside. So yes, a very cold start to Wednesday. Still some snow showers over northern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still potentially very icy here first thing in the morning. Met Office yellow warning remains in place. Further covering of snow, further few centimetres through the night and into the morning. Same goes for Northern Ireland as well. Could also be a bit foggy here first thing, and we could have some fog patches too over northwest England, parts of the North Midlands. But most of England and Wales starting dry and very frosty, but down to the southwest, signs of a change. That weather front we saw earlier just nudging northwards. Some uncertainty about how much progress it makes, and that will be crucial for how much snow we see. At the moment, it looks like we'll see quite a bit of rain on the south coast, but there is the potential for some heavy snow for a time during Wednesday across southern counties of England. So there's a warning in place for that. As I say, just the potential at this stage, something we're keeping a close eye on. Further north for many places, dry and a bright day tomorrow, but it will be a cold one. The winds, though, generally lighter, particularly over northern Scotland, where they've been perishing today. Still a few wintry showers coming in here. That mixture of sleet and snow and rain across the south scoots away through the evening time. Again, a hard frost for Thursday morning, so again, potentially icy in places. But for many places, a fine, bright, cold winter's day.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
Welcome back. Well, we're talking about grooming gangs, and your views have come in the mail logs. Paul says, Jacob, I very firmly believe there should not be a national inquiry into rape gangs. There has already been a major inquiry, albeit smaller than a national inquiry might be, but its recommendations should be followed through vigorously and quickly. This country is absolutely useless in carrying out quick inquiries. A prime example of poor productivity, and any further national inquiry will only kick the subject further down the road. It has to be said, the last government had a bill before Parliament implementing the recommendations, which this government could have carried on with had it wanted to, or reintroduced technically. One of the Reform Party's flagship policies is that of net zero migration. Most of you will know I'm no fan of net zero in climate, but when applied to immigration, it makes absolute sense. Net migration has reached record highs, and with the UK's integration and economic problems caused by mass migration, there is a strong case for just saying no. Senior Tories have urged their leader, Kemi Badenoch, to adopt this policy to try to win back some of Reform's votes. Well, my extremely pugnacious panel, as you may have noticed, is still with me. Tessa Dunlop and Kelvin Mackenzie. Tessa, I'll let you go into the ring first. The Tyson Fury of GB News.
Come on, Kelvin and I are dear friends.
We've just got to say no net migration until we've got it under control, until the people already here have integrated.
The problem is, migration doesn't work like that. It's on a needs basis. Okay, it's not that we're saying, hey, you know, we want to have a rainbow country. We want to look like a constant united Benetton advert. We're just going to invite people in willy-nilly. It doesn't work like that. It's, oh, look, we have 100,000 jobs in the care sector and we can't fill them. Even when we trawl in Europe, we can't fill them. Oh, we're going to have to trawl further, overseas, in other continents. That's how it works.
So how does Japan manage to get by without having mass migration?
Well, do you know what? Probably they've been better governed. There are many... I'm not parking this exclusively at the seat of the Conservative government. It tracks back to Tony Blair, actually, who was the one who didn't have any break on the EU migration when other countries did. And actually, rather than invest in skills, in productivity, in growing our own talent base, we just imported to fire up our economy.
Absolutely right. And that's why we need to stop it now, because then you give the incentive for businesses to train and so on and so forth. But as long as you have...
But it takes a while for trickle through. It takes a while. If you train a nurse from age 16 to the age 23, you've got that 7-year gap.
But if you don't have a tough decision, you will find that the problem never goes away, because we'll just keep on taking all these people, and people will say, as Tessa's so eloquently put it, we just need them. You've got to take the pain of having a period when, you know, wages may have to go up and things like that to attract people into industries.
Yeah, I think I don't really agree with net zero. It sounds like a comfortable, easy win for a political party. I'm not sure how it's achieved, and I'm not sure whether it should be achieved. I want our country to have very clever people, and one of our problems about our country right now is we don't seem to have either clever, many of them, or people who really want to do jobs. We don't have nurses because people don't want to be nurses. We don't have care because people don't want to run care homes or don't want to help the old dears out. And so what are we going to do about that?
What?
We have got to...
You know how you solve it? You pay them better.
You pay them
and that means you have a more socialist economy, because the Jacob Robbs of this world gradually come down, and the Kelvin Mackenzies come down a bit, and journalists and spivs and lawyers, etc., and you get care workers and nurses and teachers.
Okay, well, that's already going on. So the situation over the last 20 years, bit of economic news for you, I'm sure you enjoy, is that the professional classes 20 years ago were 2.6 for the actual minimum pay classes. That number today is 1.6. My argument about that, and there is an argument about it, is actually, do we want that to go like that? You can argue, yes, in my own family, I'm delighted to see what minimum pay does, especially for a challenged stepdaughter, right? That has turned out to be a fantastic thing to have happened. However, what it means is that people who actually probably have quite a lot that they want to offer, for instance, those people you refer to as lawyers, spivs and journalists, right? Actually, they're coming down like that. So that's already happening. And that may be one of the reasons why people have decided that even if they've got plenty to offer, actually aren't working hard enough. Our country, our CEOs, I blame them for a lot of this. Are they working hard enough? Have we got enough entrepreneurial spirit? And if we haven't got it, why don't we bring it in from outside?
Well, and actually a lot of people are leaving the country because tax rates are so high, and we've attacked non-doms. So the people Kelvin actually wants are leaving.
Yeah, you're looking at that very mobile top quartile, no, even top 5%. The problem with placing all your tax hopes and aspirational hopes on them is they can get up and go much more easily than the rest of us. So actually, what you're effectively saying is you're contradicting yourself, Kelvin.
No.
On the one hand, because you've got this stepdaughter who's opened your eyes, actually, because I believe otherwise you would have been fairly blinkered, I think you admit that yourself, opened your eyes to the importance of good pay for basic skills, means that there isn't as much money sloshing around to be creamed off at the top. That's basic economics. You only have one pot of money.
No, it's not. No,
yes,
it's not.
it is.
No,
it is, Jacob.
that is the classic lefty error. You bake a bigger pie. You grow the economy.
Do what the US is trying to do.
There is not a limited amount of money, which either I have it or you have it. If we all work harder, there's more money for everybody. You make everybody better off. You get higher productivity. You produce an extra loaf of bread, and therefore the price of bread comes down.
Don't you? So first of all, we all agree that we've got to pay our basic public sector workers more. Right, and then you make up your pie.
Including trade.
Our pie is flat.
But I don't agree with that. I think some public sector workers are hugely overpaid and get much too much in pensions. And social care workers are mainly not public sector. I think they're underpaid. But do I think the junior doctors deserved a huge pay rise? No, I don't. Do I think the train drivers deserved it? No, I don't.
They're certainly not the train drivers. But when you're next ill, Jacob, I bet you believe that junior doctors should be worth a pay rise. Actually, there's something very distorting. It's a bit like Kelvin's lived experience with his stepdaughter.
They're very well paid.
They are well
compared
paid,
to other
but
graduates.
when you're ill and no one else can help,
but
you're
we have to create more wealth in our country.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's where I agree with Labour. On the one hand, they're talking this good game, and on the other hand, they're actually doing the opposite. They're saying, well, actually, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pile all our taxes onto those areas of life which previously were wealth creation.
What none of the right-wingers, including Jacob and John Redwood, have ever managed to help me understand is how you pay your important essential workers fairly and well so that they don't rebel and strike and feel demoralised, at the same time as you grow the economy without this taxation we've seen from the Labour government. How do you do it? How do you grow the economy?
It's what Nigel Lawson managed to do. You grow the economy and then the tax that is paid produces more revenue but a smaller share of the economy.
Yeah.
And therefore you've got more money with which to pay people. On that note, we're going to have to move on. We will have further economics lessons next week. Thank you to my panel. In a moment, I will be speaking to the director of the Free Speech Union, Toby soon to be Lord Young, about the latest victory for freedom of speech.
Is he a lord?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
If you're on the hunt for some winter sun, I'm afraid it's often going to be cloudy, also with some rain. Largely dry across central areas, but it is going to be windy at times. Some cloud and rain moving into parts of Madeira and Lisbon, though largely dry across Tenerife and largely dry across central areas of the Mediterranean too. But as we move further east, more cloud for parts of Italy and also Greece, and this could be thick enough to produce some rain at times. More in the way of sunshine towards the end of the week, and temperatures widely in the mid to high teens.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
We've got a special treat for you because we can show you this lovely video of a lady running on a beach. So you're not missing much if you're listening on the radio. It is literally a woman in white writing on the beach, writing 2025.
Yes, because that's the year we're in now.
Is it?
Yes,
Wow.
and it's because Meghan Markle returned to Instagram yesterday.
Former world correspondent for The Sun, Charles Ray, joins us now. Are you inspired to remember the year, Charles?
Oh, Happy New Year to you too as well. I honestly haven't got a clue what she's doing now. You know, I would have thought we should have had the theme tune from Jaws as she was running down to the water there and everything else. They're being quite hypocritical here because they came off social media because they were getting unparalleled abuse. I don't condone at all. It is not right whatsoever. And they've spent the last few years complaining about social media.
We've seen her before with her lifestyle blog, haven't we? Before she met Prince Harry, she was running a successful blog. Do you think she wants to go back to doing that sort of thing?
I think it's possible that that's what she wants to do. I mean, I don't understand how these things work, okay? But all I know is that certain influencers earn an awful lot of money from Instagram and everything else. Now, they're talking about figures I mean, whether this is true or not, I've something like £790,000 she could earn per post. You know, so it's quite incredible what she can possibly earn out of this. It's interesting, though, Stephen and Ellie, that she's actually switched off all the comments on this one.
I noticed that.
Clearly, she doesn't want to have anybody on there saying anything nasty or anything good about it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, who says that elections don't matter? Tech billionaire Mark Zuckerberg has performed a U-turn so big that it's visible from one of Elon Musk's satellites and announced that his previously censorious platforms will be prioritising free speech. The fact-checkers are gone, the amount of censorship will be dramatically reduced, and Ultimate Fighting Championship boss Dana White has been appointed to the board after, Clegg was fired. Zuckerberg has taken a swipe at Europe, lamenting an ever-increasing number of laws, institutionalising censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative. So let's see what he had to say.
Because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more.
Well, I'm joined now by the director of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. And first of all, congratulations on being raised to the peerage. He's doing this for commercial reasons, isn't he? Trump's become president, he wants to suck up the president, and then he wraps it up as high principle.
That's possible, but it may be mixed motives. I mean, he has said some good things about free speech in the past, which were at odds, I thought, with Facebook's content moderation policy. And I think as a student at Harvard, when he created Facebook, he was a free speech warrior. So maybe he's coming back to his roots, but, I don't think we should look a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, it's fantastic news from a free speech point of view. Facebook has been censoring content at the behest of its fact-checkers on supposedly factual grounds, but in fact for transparently political reasons now for decades. So if that's ending, that's fantastic.
Well, but it's basically American politics, isn't it? That Zuckerberg bought into the Biden-Obama view of the world, didn't like Trump, didn't want to have Trump on his platform. He's lost. The Republicans did extremely well, and therefore he's had to do this screeching U-turn. It's all really American politics.
Well, clearly, it wouldn't have happened, I don't think, without the electoral success of Donald Trump. But it may be that he is actually remaining faithful to his liberal biases, but has realised that this kind of censorship of right-wing content on his platform actually has the opposite of its intended effect. I mean, he said himself that fact-checking intended to increase trust in the platform had actually eroded more trust than it had created. I mean, I think it's about time the EU, which is very much in favour of censoring so-called misinformation, disinformation, hate speech as a way of trying to counter the electoral threat by populists like Le Pen, it's about time they realised, I think, that it has the opposite of its intended effect.
And Elon Musk has shown that actually if you let people on Twitter, on his platform, correct things that they think are mistaken, you get a debate, you get a discussion, and people are able to make their own minds up about what is true and what is false.
Yes, he says he's going to adopt the X content moderation policy now, which is community notes, in which users themselves put notes correcting what they think are factual errors in posts, and users either upvote or downvote those corrections, and if they get enough upvotes, they remain. That kind of crowdsourced fact-checking is actually a much more reliable, much more politically impartial way of moderating content than employing fact-checkers.
And in terms of the victory for freedom of speech, this is a very important one, because I was actually quite worried about the idea that governments should legislate for private companies to have freedom of speech, because you have the conflict between freedom of association and freedom of speech. So that the company wants to do it itself is good news.
Yes, I agree. I mean, one of the things the Free Speech Union lobbied for in the online safety bill when it was going through Parliament is that it should include a regard for free speech. So social media companies, before deciding to remove content, should have a regard for them. It was originally going to be due regard, and I think we strengthened it to particular regard. And I didn't think that was a particularly egregious intrusion into the freedom of association of private companies. But as you say, it's fantastic that he's doing this voluntarily and not at the behest of, the federal government.
Or indeed of other governments. Will he run into difficulties with the EU, which seems to be moving, as you rightly point out, into a more controlling direction?
I think he will run into difficulty with the EU as well as the UK. There is, in the EU, under the Digital Services Act, under what is now our Online Safety Act, there will be an obligation, I think, on the part of regulators. They'll impose an obligation on social media platforms like Facebook to remove content they perceive to be politically toxic, undesirable. And he's made it very clear that he won't be removing that content, and that he will have the support of the President and the State Department. So will the chancelleries of Europe, will Downing Street be willing to take on, the President of the United States and the State Department if they get into a battle with Facebook? I doubt it.
Well, there's news coming out that the Commission is looking at taking on Musk with Twitter on its algorithms that they claim have been interfering in elections. So we could be coming to quite a battle on free speech between a US First Amendment approach to free speech and a European, historically much more open to censorship, and the UK somewhere in the middle.
Yes, I think that could be happening, but it's not a battle in which I would back the European Commission or Keir Starmer. I mean, are they really going to be willing to risk, sanctions of various kinds, tariffs? Are they going to jeopardise trade deals because they want to suppress, populism on social media platforms?
Because Trump will aggressively support his tech companies. We know that he will put America first.
Yeah. I mean, and, one difficulty is that sometimes regimes with particularly censorious policies want not only the removal of posts which they regard as unlawful in their own jurisdictions, but they want, in Australia, the e-safety commissioner wanted Musk to remove something they regarded as toxic from everywhere. Globally. They lost that battle.
They lost that battle. Well, thank you very much, Toby. And finally, some of you may remember the moment we held a milk tasting live here on State of the Nation. I'm going to do the taste testing whilst you tell us about your milk and your farm, and I will work through these and give my views when I finish. So tell me about your farm in Cheshire. And so what is this? This is the unpasteurised.
That's unpasteurised.
Warm from the cow. When was the cow milked?
Between 1 and 4 this afternoon.
OK, so this is only a few hours old.
Yeah, straight out of the tank, on the train and down to here.
Well, reassuringly, a new study has found plant-based milk, such as oat or cashew milk, increase your risk of depression and will probably make you fat. So, as I said at the time, only liberals drink skimmed milk to go with their faux leather sandals. Full, fat, creamy milk will nourish your inner Tory. Anyway, up next, it's Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what have you got on your programme this evening? I hope you're nourishing your inner Tory at any rate.
Oh, look, hey, Jacob, there's no nipple on an almond, is there? How can you have almond milk? But anyway, In other news, Jess Phillips is moaning about how hard her life is now, but she has not met with any rape gang survivors. I think that's a dereliction of duty. Robert Jemerick says we should stop immigration from medieval cultures. That's obviously right, isn't it? A 14-year-old boy has been stabbed to death on a bus in London. Crime is out of control. What do we do about it? And £14,000 bonuses for the civil servants who were responsible for helping to push through the cut to the pensioners' winter fuel payment. It just feels wrong, Jacob.
Well, that's all going to be excellent. They don't be too tough on people from the Middle Ages, time I rather enjoyed. Anyway, that's coming up after the weather. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation. And Somerset, oh, you can guess how lovely the weather's going to be in Somerset. It'll be absolutely beautiful, and possibly with a little dusting of snow, enough to make a small snowman, not a very big one, but to make the Mendip Hills just float into vision as you look across them, wherever you may happen to be within God's own county. So I hope you enjoy the weather in Somerset tomorrow. Good night.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A very good evening to you. Now the sun has set, the temperatures are tumbling. Hard frost tonight. That'll be around for much of tomorrow morning. An ice risk in some areas and some places seeing further snow. We need to watch this weather front just pushing up from the south. The weather system that's brought all the snow recently has cleared away, but we've still got the winds coming down from the north. Plenty of snow showers still to come across Northern Ireland and northern and the west coast of Scotland. The snow showers we've seen through the day across northwest England, North Wales should fade away. For many, it's a dry night, clear night. And there's that hard frost, minus double digits in some parts of the countryside. So, yes, a very cold start to Wednesday. Still some snow showers over northern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Still potentially very icy here first thing in the morning. Met Office yellow warning remains in place. Further covering of snow, further few centimetres through the night and into the morning. Same goes for Northern Ireland as well. Could also be a bit foggy here first thing, and we could have some fog patches too over northwest England, parts of the North Midlands. But most of England and Wales starting dry and very frosty, but down to the southwest, signs of a change. That weather front we saw earlier just nudging northwards. Some uncertainty about how much progress it makes, and that will be crucial for how much snow we see. At the moment, it looks like we'll see quite a bit of rain on the south coast, but there is the potential for some heavy snow for a time during Wednesday across southern counties of England. So there's a warning in place for that. As I say, just the potential at this stage, something we're keeping a close eye on. Further north for many places, dry and a bright day tomorrow, but it will be a cold one. The winds, though, generally lighter, particularly over northern Scotland, where they've been perishing today. Still a few wintry showers coming in here. That mixture of sleet and snow and rain across the south scoots away through the evening time. Again, a hard frost for Thursday morning, so again, potentially icy in places. But for many places, a fine, bright, cold